So it's okay for you to hit my car because you can't see.
It's your fault. You should have parked somewhere else.
The metallic crunch of her BMW's bumper against my Honda's side door echoed through the parking lot like a gunshot. Karen Whitmore stepped out of her pristine white sedan, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt, her face already twisted with indignation. "You parked too close," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my perfectly legal parking job. "You blocked my view." I stood there, phone in hand, watching her performance with growing disbelief. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea that her little fender bender was about to unravel everything she'd built her privileged life on. Because what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just some random victim, I was the one person in this entire city who could destroy her with a single phone. The notification ping from my phone pierced through the morning quiet as I sat in my Honda Civic, double-checking the address on my GPS Hillcrest Shopping Plaza. Space 47. I'd arrived 15 minutes early for my 10 a.m. appointment, a habit that had served me well in my line of work. The parking space was perfectly legal, well within the yellow lines, with adequate clearance on both sides. I glanced at the text message, "Meeting confirmed. Looking forward to our discussion. K. Whitmore, Karen Whitmore." The name had been circling in my investigative files for the past 3 months. Real estate developer, city council member, and according to my sources, the centerpiece of a corruption scandal that could topple half the municipal government. Today's meeting was supposed to be off the record, a chance for her to tell her side of the story before my expose hit the front page of the Tribune. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, about to interview the woman who'd been dodging my calls for weeks, and I had no idea she was about to literally crash into my life. I was reviewing my notes when the impact hit. The force jolted me forward, my coffee spilling across my lap as the distinct sound of crunching metal filled the air. My car lurched forward several inches, the parking brake grinding against the sudden momentum. Through my review mirror, I watched a pristine white BMW slowly backing away from my rear bumper, its driver apparently oblivious to what had just happened. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, unbuckling my seatbelt. The BMW's door opened, and out stepped a woman in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blazer and cream-colored slacks. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and even from a distance, I could see the flash of expensive jewelry catching the morning sunlight. She stood beside her car for a moment, surveying the damage with what appeared to be more annoyance than concern. I grabbed my phone and stepped out to assess the situation. The damage to my Honda was significant, a deep dent in the rear quarter panel, scratched paint, and what looked like a damaged taillight. The BMW, with its reinforced bumper, showed minimal damage, just a few scratches on the pristine white paint. "Excuse me," I called out, walking toward her. "I think you just backed into my car." The woman turned, and I found myself face to face with Karen Whitmore herself. The recognition hit me like a second collision. The sharp blue eyes I'd seen in countless city council photos, the practiced smile she wore during press conferences, the air of untouchable authority that seemed to radiate from her very presence. "I'm sorry," what she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who wasn't used to being questioned. "I think there's been some confusion." I gestured toward the obvious damage to both vehicles. "No confusion. You backed into my car." "I was parked, and you." "Now hold on just a minute," Karen interrupted, her voice rising. "I was simply backing out of my space when your car appeared out of nowhere. You parked too close to my vehicle, making it impossible for me to see properly." I stared at her, wondering if she was serious. "I'm parked in a legal space, well within the lines. You backed into me." "The lines are barely visible," she continued, her argument gaining momentum despite its complete lack of logic. "And you're blocking my view. How was I supposed to see with your car positioned like that?" A small crowd was beginning to gather. A few shoppers had stopped to watch the exchange, their phones already out, some clearly recording the incident. Karen seemed to notice this too, and her posture shifted slightly, as if she was stepping into a familiar role. "Look," she said, her voice taking on a more reasonable tone, "I'm sure we can work this out without involving insurance companies or police. These things happen in parking lots all the time. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the damage, the positioning of both vehicles, and the clearly marked parking spaces. Actually, I think we should follow proper procedure here. This is a clear-cut case of, are you threatening me? Karen's voice snapped back to its earlier sharpness. Because I have to tell you, I don't appreciate being treated like some kind of criminal over a minor parking lot incident. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm documenting an accident where you backed into my legally parked vehicle. Legally parked? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're taking up practically half the lane. Anyone trying to back out would have trouble seeing around your car. I looked around the parking lot, confirming what I already knew. My Honda was parked normally, with plenty of space on either side. Other cars were positioned similarly throughout the lot. There was absolutely nothing unusual about my parking job. I need to get your insurance information, I said, keeping my voice level despite my growing frustration. My insurance information? Karen's eyebrows raised. I think you're confused about who's at fault here. You're the one who parked inappropriately. If anything, you owe me for the damage to my vehicle. The audacity of the statement left me momentarily speechless. A woman pushing a shopping cart nearby actually stopped and stared, clearly as stunned as I was by what she'd just heard. You backed into me, I said slowly, as if speaking to a child. You were moving. I was parked. That's how fault works. That's your interpretation, Karen replied smoothly. But I see it differently. You positioned your vehicle in a way that created a hazardous situation. You're lucky I'm not calling the police right now to report your reckless parking. I felt my jaw clench. In my years as an investigative journalist, I'd encountered plenty of people who tried to manipulate situations to their advantage, but this was breathtaking in its shamelessness. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, calling the police. Sounds like an excellent idea. Let's get an official report. For the first time since stepping out of her car, Karen looked genuinely concerned. Now wait a minute. There's no need to escalate this. I'm sure we can reach a reasonable agreement. The reasonable agreement is that you take responsibility for backing into my car and provide your insurance information. I'm not admitting fault, she said firmly. And I'm certainly not going to let you bully me into accepting blame for your poor parking choices. I started dialing 911, but Karen stepped closer, her voice dropping to a lower register. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implication. I looked at her carefully, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd somehow recognized me. But her expression suggested otherwise. This was simply her default response to being challenged. I'm dealing with someone who backed into my car and won't take responsibility for it, I replied evenly. I'm Karen Whitmore, she said, as if the name should mean something to me. I'm a member of the city council. I have connections throughout this city, and I won't be pushed around by some. She paused, looking me up and down dismissively. Some nobody with an attitude problem. The crowd around us had grown larger. Several people were now openly filming the exchange, their phones capturing every word. Karen seemed to realize this too, but rather than backing down, she appeared to be doubling down on her position. These people are witnessing your harassment, she said, gesturing toward the crowd. They can see how you're trying to intimidate me into accepting fault for what was clearly your mistake. A middle-aged man in a baseball cap stepped forward from the crowd. Lady, I saw the whole thing. You backed right into him. He wasn't even moving. Karen turned toward the man, her expression shifting into what I recognized as her public persona, the concerned public servant addressing a constituent. I appreciate your concern, but I think you may have misunderstood what happened here. This gentleman parked his vehicle in a way that created a dangerous blind spot. No, he didn't, the man replied flatly. You backed into him. I watched you do it. More voices from the crowd began to chime in, all supporting the obvious truth of what had happened. Karen's face was beginning to show signs of strain, the practiced smile becoming more forced. I think we are all getting a little carried away here, she said, her voice rising slightly. This is a simple misunderstanding that's being blown out. of proportion. I finished dialing and held the phone to my ear. 911, what's your emergency? This is ridiculous, Karen snapped. You're wasting police resources over a minor parking lot dispute. I need to report a traffic accident, I said into the phone, giving the dispatcher our location. As I provided the details to the dispatcher, I watched Karen's demeanor continue to shift. 20 minutes later, I was still there, Cafe Luna, underneath, nursing a fresh cup of coffee and watching something else, a calculating look, as if she were still in the parking lot, drivable but wounded, a constant reminder of the morning's bizarre encounter. The insurance adjuster wouldn't be available until tomorrow, but I'd already filed the claim and submitted the police report. Karen Whitmore was 15 minutes late for our scheduled interview. I'd debated whether to leave after the parking lot incident, but journalistic curiosity had won out. I wanted to see if she'd actually show up, and if she did, whether she'd recognize me. The story potential was too rich to abandon. The woman I'd been investigating for corruption had just demonstrated her character in the most public way possible. My phone buzzed with a text from my editor. How's the Whitmore interview going? We need to finalize the weekend edition layout. I typed back, still waiting for her to show. But Jim, I think we might have an even bigger story here. Before I could elaborate, I heard the distinctive click of expensive heels on hardwood. Karen Whitmore swept into the cafe, her earlier composure restored, her blazer straightened and her smile firmly in place. She scanned the room like a politician working a crowd, clearly expecting to be recognized. She was still looking for me. I raised my hand slightly and her gaze settled on me. For a moment, her expression remained neutral, professional. Then, as recognition dawned, her face went through a remarkable transformation, confusion, shock, and finally, a flash of something that looked like panic. You, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Whitmore, I replied, standing and extending my hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I'm Marcus Chen from the Tribune. She stared at my outstretched hand as if it were a snake. You're the reporter. I am. Indeed. Please, have a seat. Karen remained standing, her mind clearly racing. This is some kind of setup. You arranged this whole thing, didn't you? The parking lot, the accident, I arranged for you to back into my car. I sat back down, gesturing to the chair across from me. That's quite an accusation. Don't play games with me, she hissed, finally taking the seat but perching on the edge as if ready to flee. You're the one who's been calling my office, harassing my staff, making wild accusations about my business dealings. I've been requesting interviews. About your role in the Riverside Development Project, yes. That's called journalism, not harassment. Karen's eyes darted around the cafe as if checking for hidden cameras or recording devices. And now you're going to write some hit piece about the parking lot incident. This is character assassination. Actually, I said, pulling out my notebook, I was hoping we could discuss the $2.3 million in construction contracts that were awarded to your brother-in-law's company without proper bidding procedures. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Clearwater Construction. Owned by David Clearwater, married to your sister Jennifer. 3 no-bid contracts in the past 18 months, all approved by city council votes. We were the deciding factor. Karen's hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her purse. This meeting is over. We haven't even started yet, I said calmly. I have documentation going back 2 years. Bank records, email communications, witness statements. You have nothing, she interrupted, but her voice lacked conviction. Whatever you think you've found, it's all perfectly legal. I've done nothing wrong. Then why not tell your side of the story? Clear the air. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. Because I don't have to justify myself to some bottom feeder with a grudge. You want a story? Here's your story. A reckless driver nearly caused a serious accident this morning and then tried to intimidate a public servant. That's the only story. Here. The cafe had gone quiet, other patrons turning to stare at the commotion. Karen seemed to realize she was making a scene, and she struggled to regain her composure. I'm calling my attorney, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. And I'm calling the police to report this harassment. You're certainly free to do that, I replied. But it might be worth noting that the police were already involved this morning. Officer Martinez was very thorough in her investigation. Karen's face flushed red. That citation is bogus and you know it. I'm going to fight it and I'm going to win. With 5 witnesses saying you backed into my parked car. Witnesses can be mistaken. Or bought. The accusation hung in the air. Between us, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Are you suggesting I bribed witnesses? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. You're a reporter with an agenda and you'll do anything to get your story. I leaned forward slightly. Ms. Whitmore, I've been investigating municipal corruption for 3 years. I've exposed embezzlement, bid rigging, and fraud. In every case, I've relied on documented evidence and credible sources. I don't manufacture stories. And yet here, you are trying to turn a simple parking lot incident into some kind of scandal. I'm not the one who made it a scandal. You did that when you refused to take responsibility for backing into my car. Karen grabbed her purse and stepped back from the table. This conversation is over. And if you print one word of lies about me, I'll sue you and your newspaper into bankruptcy. She turned to leave, but I called after her. Ms. Whitmore, there's something else you should know. She paused but didn't turn around. This morning's incident was recorded by multiple bystanders. Those videos are already making their way around social media. The hashtag Karen Parking is trending. Now she did turn around, her face a mask of fury. You orchestrated this. You planned the whole thing. I planned for you to back into my car. Really? You knew I'd be here. You positioned yourself, I positioned myself in a legal parking space 15 minutes before our scheduled interview. You're the one who chose to back into my car without looking. Karen's phone buzzed and she glanced at it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I could see her expression growing more strained with each notification. What's happening? She demanded, as if I was somehow responsible for her phone. I'd guess people are tagging you in the videos, I said. Social media moves fast these days. She stared at her phone in horror as the notifications continued. This is a nightmare. Ms. Whitmore, I came here today to give you a chance to tell your side of the story about the Riverside development contracts. That offer still stands. My side of the story. She laughed bitterly. My side is that I'm a dedicated public servant who's been targeted by a hack journalist looking to make a name for himself. With bank records and email evidence. Fabricated evidence. It has to be. I pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table. These are copies of the documents I've obtained through public records requests. Would you like to review them? Karen stared at the folder as if it might explode. I'm not looking at anything without my attorney present. You're right. But I should mention that I'm running the story this weekend, with or without your comment. Her phone buzzed again and she glanced at it reflexively. Her face went pale. How many videos are there? I don't know. But the parking lot was pretty crowded. She sank back into her chair, her earlier bravado crumbling. This is going to ruin me. Ms. Whitmore, the parking lot incident is embarrassing, but it's not what's going to ruin you. What's going to ruin you is the pattern of corruption I've uncovered. There's no corruption, she said weakly. Everything I did was legal. Legal and ethical aren't the same thing. You voted to award millions in contracts to your brother-in-law's company. That's a clear conflict of interest. I recused myself. No. You didn't. I have the voting records. You voted yes on all 3 contracts. Karen's hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. David's company was the low bidder. David's company was the only bidder. Because the bid specifications were written so narrowly that no other company could qualify. That's not. I didn't. You didn't what? Didn't help write the specifications. Because I have emails between you and the city procurement office detailing exactly how to structure the requirements. She stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. I need to make a phone call. Ms. Whitmore, wait. I stood as well. I understand you're upset, but running away isn't going to make this disappear. Talk to me. Help me understand your perspective. She turned back to face me, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger or arrogance in her expression. I saw fear. You don't understand, she said quietly. You think this is just about money, but it's not. There are people involved, people who don't like loose ends. What people? She glanced around the cafe nervously. I can't. I shouldn't have said that. Ms. Whitmore, if you're in some kind of trouble, if someone's pressuring you, nobody's pressuring me, she said quickly. I need to think. Her phone rang, and she answered it immediately. Hello. Yes, I know. I've seen them. No, I don't know how to make them stop. She listened for a moment, then her face went even paler. What do you mean, the mayor's office called? Already? She hung up and stared at me with a mixture of desperation and hatred. You have no idea what you've done. I've done my job. I've investigated corruption in city government. Your job, she repeated bitterly. Is destroying people's lives your job? Exposing corruption is my job. If that destroys the careers of corrupt officials, then yes, that's part of it. Karen's phone buzzed with a. The old pavilion at Riverside Park sat like a forgotten monument to better times, its white paint peeling and its Victorian gingerbread trim weathered grey. I arrived 20 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because the anonymous text message had left me paranoid. The park was nearly empty at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, just a few joggers on the distant trail and an elderly man feeding ducks by the pond. I'd spent the previous evening diving deeper into the Riverside development project, following financial threads that led to a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. What I'd found had kept me awake until 3 a.m., cross-referencing bank records with construction permits and city council voting records. Karen Whitmore wasn't just corrupt, she was a small fish in a much larger pond. My phone buzzed with a text from my editor. Parking lot videos hit 50,000 views overnight. You're trending on Twitter. Council meeting today at 2 p.m. Word is they are calling emergency session about recent incidents affecting member reputation. I typed back, meeting with source in an hour. This story is bigger than we thought. How much bigger? Front page. Above the fold, Pulitzer consideration bigger. Jesus. Be careful, Marcus. The sound of footsteps on gravel made me look up. Karen Whitmore approached the pavilion from the opposite direction, her usual polished appearance replaced by something that looked almost normal, jeans, a simple sweater, and sneakers. But her face looked like she hadn't slept, and her eyes kept darting around the park as if she expected someone to jump out from behind a tree. You came, she said, settling onto the bench across from me. I said I would. She pulled out a cigarette with shaking hands. I quit these 3 years ago. Started again yesterday. She lit it and took a long drag. Do you know what it's like to watch your life fall apart in real time? I imagine it's unpleasant. Unpleasant, she repeated with a bitter laugh. That's one word for it. I've gotten 47 phone calls since yesterday. My husband, my sister, my campaign manager, the mayor, reporters from every news outlet in the state. And that's just the ones I answered. Karen, can I call you Karen? You said there were people involved. People who don't like loose ends. She took another drag and stared out at the pond. How much do you know about the Riverside Development Project? I know it's a $50 million mixed-use development on the old industrial site. I know your brother-in-law's company got 3 major contracts totaling $2.3 million. I know you voted to approve all 3 without declaring a conflict of interest. That's the surface, she said quietly. That's what they wanted you to find. They. Karen looked around the park again, then leaned forward. The whole Riverside project is a money laundering operation. The development is real, but half the money flowing through it is dirty. My brother-in-law's company is just one of dozens of shell companies they're using to claim cash. I felt my pulse quicken. Whose money? Ever heard of Vincent Torino? The Name hit me like a physical blow. Vincent Torino was rumored to be one of the most powerful organized crime figures on the East Coast, though he'd never been convicted of anything more serious than tax evasion. You're saying Vincent Torino is behind the Riverside development? Not behind it. He's just one of several investors. The project is being used to legitimize money from multiple sources. Drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms dealing, you name it. My mind was racing. How do you know all this? Karen laughed bitterly. Because they recruited me. 3 years ago, when I was first elected to the council, they approached me. Very friendly, very professional. They said they were businessmen looking to invest in the city's future. They offered me a chance to be part of something big. And you said yes. I said yes to what I thought was a legitimate development deal. I didn't know what I was really signing up for until it was too late. When did you realize? About 6 months ago. I started asking questions about some of the financial irregularities I was seeing. David, my brother-in-law, he's not very bright. He let slip that some of the money he was receiving didn't match up with the work his company was actually doing. So you confronted him. I confronted him, and he panicked. He called his contact, and the next day I got a visit from 2 very serious men who explained that asking questions was bad for my health. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Karen, I need you to tell me everything. Names, dates, amounts, no. Recording, she said quickly, reaching for my phone. They have people everywhere. City Hall, the police department, the DA's office. If they find out I'm talking to you, then why are you talking to me? She took a final drag of her cigarette and flicked it away. Because yesterday, watching those videos go viral, seeing people laugh at me, call me names, I realized I'd rather die with some dignity than live as their puppet. It doesn't have to be either way. You can help me expose this. We can bring them all down. You don't understand. These people don't go to prison. They disappear problems. And right now, you and I are problems. All the more reason to move fast. Give me what you have, and I'll run the story before they can react. Karen pulled out a manila envelope from her purse. Bank records, wire transfers, meeting notes. Everything I could copy without being obvious about it. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Even at first glance, the scope was staggering. Dozens of companies, hundreds of transactions, millions of dollars flowing through the cities. Development projects over the past 2 years. This is incredible, I said. This could bring down half the city government. It could bring down more than that. The state attorney general is involved. 2 federal judges. A U.S. senator. I looked up at her. Senator Morrison. Among others. Senator Richard Morrison was chair of the Senate Banking Committee and widely expected to run for president in 2 years. If he was involved in money laundering for organized crime, Karen, this is the story of the century. Why come to me? Why not the FBI? Because I don't know who to trust in law enforcement. And because... She hesitated. Because I think they are planning to tie up loose ends soon. What do you mean? There have been accidents. 3 people connected to the project have died in the past 6 months. A car crash, a heart attack, a fall down the stairs. All very convenient, all very clean. You think they were murdered? I think they were asking too many questions, just like I was. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, beautiful morning for a walk in the park. Enjoy the fresh air while you can. I showed Karen the message and her face went white. They know we're here. We need to leave. Now. Wait, she said, grabbing my arm. There's something else. The reason I really called you here. What? They are planning something big. A final phase to the operation. I don't know all the details, but I overheard a conversation. They are going to use the Riverside development groundbreaking ceremony next week to move a massive amount of money. Once that's done, they are going to clean house. Clean house. Everyone who knows too much. Everyone who could be a problem. They are going to eliminate the witnesses and disappear. I felt cold despite the warm morning sun. How do you know this? Because they told me I was going to have an accident after the ceremony. They said it would look like I was driving drunk, maybe hit a tree on the way home. Very sad, very believable. Jesus Christ. So you see why I had to act now. The parking lot incident, the videos, your investigation, it's all accelerated their timeline. They can't afford to have me in the spotlight anymore. Another text came through. Time to go, reporter. Your interview is over. Karen stood up quickly. They are watching us right now. I looked around the park but saw nothing obviously threatening. The joggers were still jogging, the old man was still feeding ducks. But something felt wrong. Karen, come with me. We'll go to my editor, then to the FBI. We'll figure out who we can trust. I can't. If I disappear with you, they'll know I talked. At least this way, I might have a few more days. A few more days to what? To get my affairs in order. To say goodbye to my family without them knowing it's goodbye. She started walking away, then turned back. Mr. Chen, Marcus, be very careful. With that information. Don't go home tonight. Don't follow your usual routines. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone in law enforcement until you're absolutely sure they are clean. Wait, I called after her. How do I contact you? You don't. If I have more information, I'll find you. She walked away quickly, leaving me alone in the pavilion with an envelope full of evidence and a growing sense that I was in way over my head. My phone rang. Jim, my editor. Marcus, where are you? The mayor's office just called. They are demanding a meeting with you and the publisher. They are threatening to pull all city advertising from the paper. Jim, I need to come in right now. And I need you to call our lawyer. We are going to need legal protection for the story I'm about to give you. How big is this? I looked down at the envelope in my hands, then around the park one more time. Remember Watergate? This is bigger. Jesus. Get in here now. As I walked back to my car, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there when I arrived. The windows were tinted and I couldn't see inside, but I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. I got in my Honda, still dented from yesterday's encounter, and drove away, checking my rearview mirror constantly. The black sedan didn't follow me, but 2 blocks later, a different car, a grey SUV, seen. The Tribune newsroom at 11:30 a.m. should have been buzzing with pre-deadline energy, but something felt wrong the moment I stepped off the elevator. Too many people were staring at their computers instead of talking. Too many conversations stopped. When I walked by, and Jim Peterson, my editor of 8 years, looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Conference room. Now, he said, not even looking up from his desk. I followed him into the glass-walled room where 3 people were waiting: Sarah Martinez, our publisher, David Chang, the paper's legal counsel, and someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 40s wearing a dark suit and an expression that screamed federal law enforcement. Marcus, Sarah said without preamble, this is Special Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI. She has some questions about your investigation into City Council member Karen Whitmore. Agent Torres stood and extended her hand. Mr. Chen, I understand. You've been in contact with Ms. Whitmore regarding allegations of municipal corruption. Every instinct I'd developed as an investigative journalist started screaming warnings. Karen's words echoed in my head: don't trust anyone in law enforcement until you're absolutely sure they are clean. I've been investigating irregularities in city contracting processes, I said carefully. That's a matter of public record. I've filed numerous information requests. And yesterday you had a personal encounter with Ms. Whitmore in a parking lot, followed by a scheduled meeting at a local cafe. Also a matter of public record. There was a traffic accident and we had a previously arranged interview. Agent Torres smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Chen, we have reason to believe that Ms. Whitmore may be involved in activities that threaten national security. Any information she may have shared with you could be vital to an ongoing federal investigation. I glanced at Jim, who was staring at his hands. Sarah looked uncomfortable but determined. David, our lawyer, was taking notes but avoiding eye contact. What kind of activities? She asked. I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, but I can tell you that Ms. Whitmore has been under federal surveillance for several months. Her recent erratic behavior, including yesterday's very public incident, suggests she may be preparing to flee the country. It was a good story. Professional, plausible, designed to make me feel like I was helping rather than being manipulated. But there were problems with it. Agent Torres, can you show me some identification? She reached into her jacket and produced an FBI badge and ID card. They looked authentic, but then again, I wouldn't know a fake from the real thing. I'd like to verify your identity with the FBI field office, I said. Mr. Chen, time is of the essence here. Ms. Whitmore could disappear at any moment, and with her, critical intelligence about a network that poses a significant threat to national security. Then you'll understand why I want to be absolutely certain I'm speaking with a legitimate federal agent. Agent Torres exchanged a look with Sarah, and I saw something pass between them that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the first conversation they'd had. Sarah, I said, how long has Agent Torres been here? She arrived about an hour ago, Sarah replied, but her voice sounded strained. And you didn't think to call me immediately? Marcus, Jim finally spoke up, we need to cooperate with federal law enforcement. If there's a national security issue, there's no national security issue, I interrupted. This is about organized crime and money laundering. Local corruption with federal implications. Yes, but not terrorism or espionage. Agent Torres leaned forward. Mr. Chen, how can you be so certain about what this investigation involves? Because I just spent an hour listening to Karen Whitmore explain exactly what it involves, I thought. But I couldn't say that without revealing that Karen had talked, which could get her killed. Because I've been investigating it for months, I said instead. I know what I'm looking at. And what exactly are you looking at? The room fell silent. 4 pairs of eyes were focused on me, waiting for an answer that could determine whether Karen Whitmore lived or died. I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I'm looking at bid rigging and conflict of interest violations. Nothing that would interest the FBI. Agent Torres studied my face for a long moment. Mr. Chen, I hope you understand the serious consequences of withholding information from a federal investigation. I understand the serious consequences of sharing information with someone whose identity I can't verify. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Agent Torres stood. Very well. I'll be in touch, Mr. Chen. I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. After she left, the room erupted. Marcus, what the hell are you doing? Sarah demanded. You just stonewalled the FBI. Did I? Or did I just refuse to cooperate with someone claiming to be the FBI? Her credentials looked legitimate, David said. Her credentials looked expensive. There's a difference. Jim was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Marcus, level with us. How big is this story really? I looked around the room at these people I'd worked with for years, people I trusted, people who'd backed me through every difficult investigation I'd pursued. But Karen's warning kept echoing, they have people everywhere. It's big enough that someone just sent a fake FBI agent to pump me for information. You don't know she was fake, Sarah protested. Then let's call the FBI field office and check. Sarah reached for her phone, then paused. What if she was real and we embarrassed the paper by questioning her credentials? Then we apologize. But if she was fake and we gave her information that gets someone killed, we'll have more than embarrassment to worry about. David was already dialing. FBI field office. This is David Chung, legal counsel for the Tribune. I need to verify the identity of one of your agents. Rebecca Torres. She visited our offices this morning. I see. No, I understand it. Thank you. He hung up and looked at us with a grim expression. No special agent Rebecca Torres is assigned to this field office. In fact, no agent by that name is assigned to any FBI office in the state. The room went dead silent. Jesus Christ, Jim whispered. Who was that woman? Someone who really wanted to know what Karen Whitmore told me, I said. Sarah's face had gone pale. Marcus, if these people are sophisticated enough to send someone impersonating a federal agent, what else are they capable of? Before I could answer, the lights in the newsroom went out, emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see reporters and editors looking around in confusion. Power outage? Jim asked. Or something else, I said, moving to the window that overlooked the street. Look. 3 black SUVs were parked along the curb in front of the building. As we watched, men in dark clothing emerged from each vehicle. They moved with military precision, and several were carrying what looked like equipment cases. David, call 911, I said. And tell them what? That there are people in dark clothing outside our building. Tell them there are armed men surrounding the Tribune. You don't know they are armed. One of the men looked up at our window and pointed. He spoke into a radio, and immediately the other teams began moving toward the building's entrances. Now I know, I said. My phone buzzed with a text message, come downstairs, Mr. Chen. Come alone. You have something that belongs to us. They want me to go down there, I said, showing the others the message. You're not going anywhere, Sarah said firmly. Sarah, if I don't go down there, they are going to come up here. And when they do, it won't just be me they are after. Another text, you have 30 seconds to decide. Then we come to you. Everyone in that newsroom becomes a witness that needs to be eliminated. I looked around the room at these people I'd worked with, laughed with, shared countless deadline pressures with. They were good people who'd stumbled into a nightmare because of my investigation. I'm going down there. Marcus, no, Jim said. We call the police. The police may be compromised. These people have infiltrated city government, state government, maybe federal agencies. How do we know the police aren't part of it? Then what do we do? I pulled out the envelope Karen had given me and handed it to David. Copy everything in here. Send copies to every major news outlet in the country. If something happens to me, make sure this story gets told. Nothing's going to happen to you, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe not. But if it does, promise me you'll run the story anyway. Marcus, another text, time's up. The elevator at the far end of the newsroom dinged and the doors opened. 3 men in tactical gear stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks, assault rifles clearly visible. The newsroom erupted in screams and chaos as reporters dove under desks and behind filing cabinets. Stay here, I told the others. Don't come out until they are gone. I opened the conference room door and stepped into the newsroom. The men spotted me immediately and began moving in my direction, their weapons raised but not quite pointed at the terrified journalists huddled throughout the room. I'm Marcus Chen, I called out. I'm coming with you. Nobody else needs to get hurt. The lead man nodded and spoke into his radio. Package acquired. Extracting now. As they escorted me toward the elevator, I caught sight of Jim's face through the conference room glass. He looked stricken, helpless, and absolutely determined. I knew that expression. He was going to run the story no matter